Speaking of art in a contemporary electric gaming society and gamer theory, Mackenzie Wark claims, quote, "The artist is now the insider who finds a new style of trifling within the game. The artist as outsider is dead, for there is no outside from which to signal back across the border. The limit to the game has to be found from within," end quote. Throughout his book, Wark makes an unclear distinction between the game, or the virtual world of the game, and game space, the gaming world extended beyond the borders of a particular game and into what Wark refers to as, quote, everyday life. In other words, he blurs these two seemingly separate realms and highlights the extent to which the game space of life is already a game. Rather than trying to distinguish between the two, it might be more productive to consider how these two spaces overlap and what they have to say about each other. He goes on to note that, quote, "There is a tension between the game and game space. The relation between them is at once analog and digital, both a continuum and a sharp break. The gamer struggles to make of the game a separate world, for escape, for critique, for utopian play, and yet game space insinuates itself into the game," end quote. In this moment, Wark also suggests that games cannot offer complete escape from the world beyond game space, or everyday gaming practice, because such a world does not exist. As a way to bridge the game and game space without taking a reductive approach to the ways in which these spaces intersect and overlap, Wark recalls the allegory as an important literary device that might resonate for virtual or electorate reality as well. He posits that, quote, "Allegory becomes a double relation. On the one side, there is the relation of gamer to algorithm in the game, its algorithm. On the other, there is the algorithm to everyday life in game space," end quote. What these two spaces say to one another through allegory can take one of two forms for Wark. First, the game can allow players to, quote, "escape from the agony of everyday life, where the stakes are real and uncertain, to the unreal stakes of a pure game," end quote. Or, secondly, quote, "The game can also work as a critique of the unreality of the stakes of game space," end quote. Here, it seems that Wark does ascribe to an idea of a pure game that can evade the real stakes of what seems like the real world. But I would argue there can be no pure game completely detached from a world that has real stakes, real contexts, and real lives at risk. There is, instead, the algorithm. Take, for example, the interactive game The Walking Dead. In the game, players encounter an apocalyptic narrative that asks them to react and try to survive in a world that's crawling with zombies, or walkers as they're called in the game. Playing the game may be seen as a form of escapism, since the zombies are not real and their cartoonish appearance reiterates that this is a fictional space. The Walking Dead world is one in which you have more than one chance to kill off an attacking zombie. It is a world where you can press pause, a world where you have time to explore, to wander, to get lost, a world where you can go back and play again, making different choices with a clean slate. It is, perhaps most importantly, a world that we might say has unreal stakes. If Lee dies in the game, he can quickly come back to life and try again. If Lee chooses to save one player in the game over another, there is the impossible chance that they will both be saved. In life, there are not always these devices, tools, and lucky chances. However, while this game may not have real stakes in terms of the life and death of various characters, the emotional responses that this game can invoke in players are very real. For example, one of the most emotionally painful moments from the game for me is when one of the main characters, Katja, finds herself in a disturbing situation as a mother. Her son, who is bitten by a zombie, starts to turn, and she realizes that the best thing she can do is put him out of his misery. She carries him off to the woods to shoot him, and Lee and Kenny stand together in mourning as they watch her leave. When a shot is fired, they run to comfort Katja and find that rather than shooting the boy, she has instead shot herself. At this point in the story, I was so shocked and emotionally bothered, I began to tear up without even thinking about my response. In that moment, perhaps a part of me forgot that the game wasn't real. Katja had been one of my favorite characters in the game, along with Carly, who had also met with a violent end just a few scenes before. Katja is a calming presence from the first time Lee meets her, when she tells him that they have to maintain hope that the world will go back to the way it was before the zombie apocalypse. Her death in the narrative highlights the impossibility of living in a world where a mother has to kill her child in order to save him from turning into a zombie. Her death, furthermore, resonates as a last message that rejects her former admonition to maintain hope. There is no hope, her action says, of a return to the world before apocalypse. To return to Wark's point, I want to say, through his narrative, that I will agree with him up to a point. My tears in this moment were not for a real person, and Katja, an unreal person, did not die. But the tears that comprised my response were real. The hopelessness that this moment makes viewers feel is real. Perhaps in general, games do not have real stakes in comparison to game space. But games are haunted by real problems, emotions, and decisions that inundate us in our everyday lives. And perhaps when we are confronted with one of these emotions while under the illusion that we are escaping it, we will be unprepared for the sudden onslaught of feeling.